A poor laundry girl gave a frozen cowboy her only cloak. His cattle filled 3 valleys. The cloak smelled like lye soap and wood smoke. That's the first thing I remember about it. Not the weight of it dropping across my shoulders, not her face, the smell. Like she'd carried it over a fire that morning and hadn't thought twice about parting with it. I was sitting against the south wall of the laundry house in Decker's Crossing, Wyoming, January of 1887, and I was about to die. Not dramatic about it, not scared even. Just done. My hands had gone past hurting into something quieter, and my jaw had locked up so tight I couldn't have spoken if I'd tried. I'd ridden in the night before on a horse that had more sense than I did, found the alley between the laundry house and the feed store and just stopped. Couldn't go further. The horse wandered off somewhere. I didn't watch where. The cold in Wyoming that January wasn't like the cold I'd grown up with in Missouri. Missouri cold was mean. Wyoming cold was indifferent. It didn't want to kill you. It just had no opinion about whether you lived. I heard the door before I saw her. Old wooden door, the kind with a leather hinge on the bottom that drags the frame when it swings. Distinctive sound, one scrape and a thud. I know that sound now like I know my own breathing. I've heard it 10,000 mornings since. She came around the corner with a basket of wet linens on her hip, and she stopped when she saw me. She was maybe 22. Dark hair pulled back, hands red from the water, boots that had been resoled at least twice. She looked at me the way a person looks at a problem they didn't ask for. I tried to say something. I don't know what came out. She set down the basket. Didn't say a word, just went back inside and came out wearing the cloak, gray wool, moth-eaten at the left hem, missing 2 buttons on the collar, and put it on my shoulders. Then she went back for the basket and kept walking to the drying line. That was it. That was the whole transaction. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything about her except that she worked in Mabel Fitch's laundry house for 50 cents a day, and she'd just given a dying stranger the only warm outer garment she owned in the middle of a Wyoming winter. I have thought about that moment every day for 31 years. My name is Calvin Prout. I was 34 years old that January, and I had nothing. Not the romantic kind of nothing, not the cowboy with a dream kind. Real nothing. $60 in debt to a man in Colorado I hoped never to see again. A horse I'd lost. A bedroll I'd left at a camp 3 days east when the storm hit. I had the clothes on my back, a skinning knife, and a tin of matches that had gotten wet somewhere outside of Rawlins. I'd left Missouri at 19 with a cousin who had a plan. The plan didn't work. The cousin went back. I didn't, partly out of stubbornness and partly because there was nothing in Missouri I needed to return to. My mother had been dead 4 years by then, my father longer than that, and the farm had gone to my uncle who hadn't wanted it either. You keep moving because moving feels like forward even when it isn't. 15 years of drifting. I was a decent hand, good with horses, better with cattle, could read weather and grass and the temperament of a herd with the kind of instinct you either have or you don't. I'd worked for 3 different outfits in Colorado and 2 in Wyoming, always as a hired hand, always on someone else's land. I saved money sometimes, lost it other times to bad luck and worse judgment. By the winter of '87, I was as close to finished as I'd ever been. And then a girl put a cloak on my shoulders and kept walking. She brought me soup an hour later. Didn't announce it. Just came around the corner again with a tin cup and set it on the ground next to me. The soup was mostly hot water with a heel of bread dissolved in it and something that might have been onion. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. By evening I could move my hands again. I stood up on the second try, picked up the cloak. I was going to hand it back, and she was already there in the doorway watching me. "Keep it till morning," she said. "You can leave it on the step." She had a voice like she didn't use it much. Flat, direct, no flourish. "I'll leave it on the step," I said. I didn't. I went inside the feed store next door and told the man behind the counter, Hiram Goss, I'd learn his name later, that I needed work. Any work. He looked at me the way men looked at drifters in those days, assessing what kind of trouble, calibrating how desperate. "Can you shovel?" he said. "I can shovel," I said. I shoveled his loading dock clear of 2 feet of snow that night. He gave me 50 cents and the use of his back room till morning. I left the cloak on the laundry house step before first light. I put a smooth stone on top of it so it wouldn't blow away. I don't know why I remember the stone. It was gray, river-worn, about the size of a man's fist. I set it down carefully, like it mattered. It did matter. That's why I remember it. I stayed in Decker's Crossing. I hadn't planned to. I'd planned to keep moving south once the weather broke, maybe find work in New Mexico. But Hiram Goss needed a hand through the winter. His regular man had gone home to Iowa to tend a sick mother, and 50 cents a day was 50 cents a day. I slept in the back room for 6 weeks. I ate at the boarding house across the street, 2 meals a day for 30 cents. At the end of 6 weeks I had $11 clear, which was more saved money than I'd had in 2 years. In that time I learned her name, Nora Vasquez. Her father had been a Mexican trader who died of fever when she was 11. Her mother, a Scotch-Irish woman from Nebraska, had died 3 years after that. She'd come to Decker's Crossing with a woman named Ruth Harker, who had since married and moved to Oregon, and stayed because Mabel Fitch had offered her work, and she didn't have anywhere else she needed to be. She was 21, not 22. She'd been working the laundry since she was 18. I knew all this secondhand from Hiram and from the woman at the boarding house before I ever spoke more than 12 words directly to Nora. She was not unfriendly. She was just contained. She went to work, she went home, she went to Sunday service at the Baptist church. She did not encourage conversation. I was not a man who pushed where he wasn't wanted. I'd learned that the hard way. What I did instead was notice things. She walked to work in the dark, winter mornings in a coat I recognized, the kind of coat that is not warm enough. The resoled boots had a crack along the left welt that would let in water when the snow melted. Mabel Fitch paid her 50 cents a day and was late with it about half the time, and when she was late Nora didn't say anything, just waited. She did the work of a woman and a half. She never complained where anyone could hear her. By March I had made a decision. It took me a while to understand what the decision was exactly. On the surface it looked like a decision about cattle. Underneath it was something else. There was a man named Odell Prout. No relation. The name was a coincidence that had caused me trouble before, who had a small holding 8 miles north of town. 47 head of cattle, a frame house, a good well, and a winter that had broken him. He was 63 years old, and his son had gotten himself killed in a card game in Cheyenne the previous autumn, and he'd come through the winter alone and was done. Wanted to sell, move to his sister's place in Kansas, be out from under it. The 47 head were his asking price. He'd take them for the land and house and everything on it, just wanted someone to take the cattle so he didn't have to winter them alone again. 47 head. That was $47 at auction, maybe $60 if they were healthy and the buyer wasn't trying you. I had $11. I needed 46 more, and I had no collateral and no name worth lending against. Hiram Goss lent me the money. I still don't fully understand why. I'd worked for him 3 months and done the job cleanly and hadn't caused him any trouble, but that's a thin basis for a $46 loan. When I asked him later, years later, he said, "You put that stone on the cloak." I told him I didn't know what that meant. He said, "Yes, you do." Maybe I do. I signed the paper with Odell Prout on a Saturday in April 1887. I gave him 11 of my own dollars and Hiram's 46. He shook my hand and left for the train the following Tuesday. I was 34 years old and I owned 47 cattle and 40 acres, and a frame house with a good well. I had never owned anything in my life. I am going to tell you what the next 4 years looked like. Not to brag. I am past the age for bragging, past the age where it means anything, but because it matters to the story. Because a woman who gave a dying stranger her only cloak deserves to have the whole accounting laid out. The first year was survival. I kept the herd through the summer, sold 12 at Rawlins in October, $53, paid Hiram back in full, bought 2 bulls and a cow heavy with calf. I worked the land alone, repaired the fences alone, did everything a 2-man operation needed and did it as one man. I ate whatever was cheapest. I didn't sleep enough. My hands looked 60 years old by that autumn and I was 35. I saw Nora Vasquez in church most Sundays, from across the building. She always sat on the left side, 3 pews from the back. I had started attending partly because it was the decent thing to do and partly, I'll be honest, because of those 3 pews. We spoke sometimes, not about anything that mattered, weather, the road, whether Hiram's new supplier was any good. She was not cold toward me, she was just careful. The way a person who has been left by everyone they've known eventually learns to be careful about who they let close enough to matter. I understood that. I wasn't in a hurry. Second year, I ran 80 head through the summer and bought the adjacent 20 acres when the widow Solon decided to sell. Third year, I hired my first hand, a young Crow man named Takes the Road, who turned out to be the best horseman I'd ever seen and who stayed with me for 12 years. Fourth year, I ran 220 head, and my cattle were ranging into what the locals called the Bridger Flats, which was grazing land nobody had filed on because the creek crossing was awkward. I filed on it in October of 1890. That was the Third Valley, technically, though we didn't call it that yet. Somewhere in that fourth year, I couldn't tell you exactly when, things changed between Nora and me. Not dramatically. It wasn't one conversation. It was more like the way a season changes. You can't point to the day, but one morning you notice the light is different. She had left Mabel Fitch's by then. Mabel had gotten sick, her heart, the doctor said, and closed the laundry. Nora had taken in mending from the boarding house, piecework, and she'd started baking for the restaurant on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She was getting by. She always got by. She was the most competent person I had ever known for getting by on almost nothing and making it look like enough. I asked her to ride out and see the place. That was how I put it, just, would she like to see the place? She said yes without making a thing of it, and the following Sunday after service she rode out with me. I showed her the house, the barn I'd added, the well. The cattle spread across the flats to the north. Takes the Road's cabin at the edge of the tree line. The view east, toward where the creek bent south, and the grass was the deep dark green that only comes from good water underneath. She stood at the fence rail and looked out at it for a long time without saying anything. "You built all this," she finally said, "not a question." "Started with 47 head and some luck," I said. She turned and looked at me. Not the way women look at men in stories. I've heard enough stories to know the difference. She looked at me the way you look at something you are deciding whether to trust. Level, taking the measure. "You didn't start with luck," she said. "Luck didn't do this." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what to say. "You put that stone on my cloak," she said. "I watched you from the window." I hadn't known that. "I thought, whoever does that is going to be all right," she said. "Whatever else, he's going to be all right." She turned back to the cattle then, and I stood beside her, and neither of us said anything else for a while. But something had been settled. The way things get settled, not with words, but with the plain fact of 2 people standing next to each other and neither one moving away. We married in June of 1891. The service was at the Baptist church, the same one we'd been attending from opposite sides of the building for 4 years. Takes the Road stood up with me. Hiram Goss was there, older now and moving slow, but he came. Mabel Fitch came in a chair, her heart giving her trouble, and she cried through the whole service. I bought Nora a coat that winter. A good one, wool broadcloth, sheepskin lining, big enough to keep out a Wyoming January. I drove to Cheyenne to get it because I didn't want to get her what was available in Decker's Crossing. I wanted the best one I could find. The man at the shop in Cheyenne said it was the finest he had. I paid without blinking, which I could do by then, and I brought it home and gave it to her on a Tuesday morning in November before the first hard snow came. She held it a minute before she put it on, running her hands over the wool. "This is too much," she said. "No, it isn't," I said. She looked up at me. "This is not close to enough," I said. "This is not close to the beginning of enough." She understood what I meant. She knew the accounting I was running in my head, not money, not coats. She'd known it longer than I had, I think. She put the coat on and buttoned it to the collar and stood there in the kitchen light looking like a woman who had never doubted herself a day in her life, which was not true, but that was how she looked. I put my hands on her shoulders, and she put her hands over mine, and that was that. The valley we call ours now isn't one valley. It's three, connected by the creek and the flats. The Bridger Flats to the north, the home quarter where the house and barn sit, and the south pasture along the Solon Creek where we winter the younger stock. On a clear morning in October, if the light is right, you can stand on the rise behind the barn and see cattle in all three directions, just dark shapes moving slow on the grass, the way cattle do, not in any hurry, not going anywhere, just grazing on land that belongs to them. I stand there some mornings, more now that I'm 65 than I used to. Takes the road son runs the day work now, good man, his father's instincts, better head for figures, and I don't need to be everywhere at once the way I did. So I stand on the rise sometimes and look. The thing nobody tells you about building something from nothing is that you don't feel it while it's happening. You just work. You're too tired and too close to it to feel anything except the next problem. You feel it later. You feel it standing on a rise looking at three valleys of cattle in the October light, and the feeling isn't pride exactly. It's quieter than that. It's more like recognition, like something that was supposed to happen finally has. Nora comes up sometimes and stands beside me. She doesn't say much. Neither do I. We're past the age of filling silence with noise. She'll put her hand through my arm, or I'll put my hand over hers on the rail, and we'll stand there a while. She still has the gray wool cloak. I don't know why she kept it, 2 buttons missing, the moth hole bigger now, no practical use. It's folded in a cedar chest in the bedroom with her mother's Bible and the deed to the original 40 acres. I asked her once why she kept it. She thought about it. Not long. She's not a woman who takes long to know her own mind. "Because it was the first thing I gave you," she said, "and I don't throw away things I give to people I mean to keep." That's Nora Vasquez Prout. That's her exactly. 65 years old and standing on a rise in the October light with 3 valleys of cattle below us, and the woman who started all of it standing beside me with her hand in my arm. There was a morning once, January of 1887, when I was sitting in an alley in Decker's Crossing, Wyoming, and I was done. Hands gone still, jaw locked up, the cold making up its mind about me. And a girl with red hands and risoled boots came around the corner with a basket of wet linens and changed the whole rest of it. I've thought about that every day for 31 years. I'll think about it tomorrow too.